2 Timothy 2:15, a terrific verse. Let me just read it. Do your best to present yourself to God as one approved, a worker who does not need to be ashamed and who correctly handles the word of truth. When I was a little boy, all we had was the King James Version of the Bible, and that's the version. I was going to say this is the version that I used to memorize this scripture back in the day. I think it was at church camp or vacation Bible school. But the truth is I probably sort of memorized it. But it still rings in my head. Here, listen to this out of the authorized version, the King James Version. Study to shew thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. You know what? As a kid, I thought that was, I'd heard of Shakespeare, and I had heard Shakespeare read out loud a time or two and thought, there it is. That's like Shakespeare. Study to shew thyself approved. Well, here's the thing. Let's just look at the whole picture, right? Do your best. We talked about that last time. Bring your best. And the King James Version leaves it's not just an impression. It states it outright. To present yourself to God as one approved, you've got to study. Now, I believe that. I still believe it, and I practice it in my own life, although I'm not like, here, I'm your role model. No, there are a lot better role models than me in this, but I love to study Scripture. When I study Scripture, there are a few things, and I'm going to recommend you consider these, that I focus on. One is, let's think about what the original hearers might have heard. And to do that, we have to think about culture and ancient history. Most Americans have hardly any grasp on ancient history. For most Americans, the Civil War is ancient history. Boy, not so, and you know that. We had the honor, God gave my wife Debbie and I the gift that this last time while we were in the Middle East, in Jordan, to offer care and encouragement to our staff at Books and More, Reading for All in Jordan. We were there for a week, and we got to take a week with James Backus. He's the director of our Jordan library, and he's been to Egypt many times, and he went with us and served as our, I guess the best thing I could say is as our travel agent. He had used a guide that he liked very much, and we fell in love with. The hotel accommodations were royal. Everything about our trip was incredible. But did I mention we went to Egypt and Cairo? We saw the pyramids and the Sphinx, and we saw tombs. We saw a papyrus making demonstration, and we spent a lot of money, so we must have had a good time. But boy, the Egyptian Museum was one of the most amazing things I've experienced. We're looking at statues that are 4,000 years old. Okay, I can go on and on, but here's the thing. when you see things that are 4,000 years old, it kind of resets your perspective on history. So we need to become students of ancient history if we're going to interpret Scripture. The point of interpreting Scripture is less for the sake of teaching it and more for the sake of understanding it for ourselves. I don't believe that you can study Scripture and leave out the ancient cultures in which it was written. Okay, so that's one thing. I'm also a word guy, and individual words and their arrangement matter to me. I'm intrigued by words that appear often. And when that happens, occasionally it's been just the offhand word that I've studied deeply. And with the internet, the tools available to anyone who has internet access are amazing. Over 45 years of ministry, I had required a pretty sizable library of theological books, commentaries, expository dictionaries, and on it goes. All of those are available online. But if you want to understand what a word that you read, and it seems important to the understanding of the verse or passage, you've got tools at hand. You can use the internet to a couple of the tools that I've, in my own life, have found so interesting and helpful. One is International Standard Bible Encyclopedia, ISBE. And I think it was in 4 volumes. It offers both historical and archaeological insight and word insights. In other words, it offers a history of words in their original language, and it's very helpful. Vine's Expository Dictionary of New Testament Words is a terrific tool and so easy to use. There are others that are the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. You don't have to have background to use it, but sometimes you have to look a little further. There are lots of resources available. So the thing is, the words that we have in the translations that we enjoy reading correspond to the words that were used in the original language, which in the New Testament is mainly Greek, virtually all Greek. And yet they have this connection, and they are, close, but you can get a little closer by looking at the original languages. Okay, study, understand the historical and cultural background, understand that words mean things, and searching out what meaning did Paul or Peter or James or Jude or John or Matthew or Mark or Luke, what words did they use, and what do those words mean? And often a Greek word is a combination of 2 smaller words put together, and to me it's intriguing. A third thing is to look at various versions and the translations. A lot of people I think most of us are not educated to be able to understand that what Bible translation really is all about. There are some versions of the Bible that are available to us today that are an attempt at word-for-word translation. The ESV, the English Standard Version, the New American Standard Bible, NASB. These are attempts at a word-for-word translation. They are not literally word-for-word. If you ever want a word-for-word, you have to go to an interlinear Bible, which is very interesting for word people. But as you look at it, the Greek syntax is not like English syntax. And so some of the things, if you're looking for a word-for-word literal translation, the word order, it gets very fuzzy. I'm not against word for word. They make a decent attempt, and I think the motive for these word for word translations is to be as accurate to the earliest documentation that we have. There is a second way, and that is a thought for thought translation. This is what the New Living Translation is, which is, by the way, according to my daughter, who is a Greek and Hebrew scholar, a very reliable translation of Scripture. The New International Version is a thought for thought translation. Reading these things and from different versions of the Bible occasionally gives a very interesting, broader picture for understanding. The point I'm trying to make is almost none of us can support any kind of excuse for not studying the Bible. Well, I don't understand. It's just too far over my head. Oh, don't do that. Don't go there. It's not. It's not over your head. It requires effort to understand certain portions of Scripture. And you know what? I've been working at studying Scripture for 50 years, and there are parts of it I don't get yet. Okay, that's true. But the majority of it, I can understand, and you can too, if we put the effort into. That's, the King James, study to show yourself approved. And here Paul writes what we have in the New International Version: do your best to present yourself to God as one approved. Study. Is it all about study? No. Because if I want to present myself to God as one approved, I both have to have studied, and then I have to figure out how to apply what I've studied, not to everybody else out there, but to me. It's so tempting for me. I'm reading Scripture. One of my daily practices is a read through the Bible app that I use on my phone and iPad from the YouVersion people, which, by the way, YouVersion is one of the greatest gifts to the world, especially the Christian community. It's free, and you've got tons and tons of different translations and versions of the Bible available to you for download on your phone. Well, they have this one, you read through the Bible in a year, and every time I'm going to set Leviticus aside, but I'm in just finished 1 Kings, and now I'm in 2 Kings, which is virtually all narrative. I'm reading this and thinking, man, I loved it when I got to tell that story in junior church, or I loved it when I got to preach about that. That's all fine and good, but I also have to look into my own life and say, ooh, that principle is still for me. Application. Well, I've successfully left myself with no time for application here. I'll come back to it next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.